Hello everyone. Today we'll be taking a look at Ticket to Ride and Guy's model of game-based learning by Adina Lowenstein and Justin Rangel. So, what is Guy's model of game-based learning? Well, it falls down into three categories: empowering learners, problem-based learning, and deep understanding. So now let's talk about empowering the learner. Learning occurs when the player or learner feels that what he or she does is important throughout the game, or at least has an effect on its outcome. One good example of this is in Fallout. It is an open world game where the main protagonist can do whatever he or she wants. It sounds like fun at first, but in the first city you go to, you quickly learn that your choices have huge consequences. For example, you're given the choice, which is in Megaton City, to detonate an atom bomb. If you choose to detonate this bomb, everything will be gone for the rest of the game. This one city will be completely gone, like completely off the map. And when you detonate this bomb, you quickly learn that people will have a negative personality around you. People won't want to talk to you. Prices will be higher. So you quickly learn that your choices have a huge effect in this world. As Guy stated, the decision you make and how you play affects the game. So in a sense, you are co-designing the game, and your choices and actions for the player to take. And by taking them, you in your own way are co-designing the game. So in order to make successful choices and outcomes, you must learn how the game is played in order to achieve your goal or a desirable outcome. The next one I want to look at is problem-based learning. Every game always has a problem or obstacle that the player must overcome or face. Each single time, the player must find new ways to overcome the obstacle. As James Gee mentioned, a good game allows the problem to be solved in many different ways. Like in the game Breath of the Wild, there are many ways to solve the shrines. You come across shrines throughout the game, and they each pose a certain problem. But using your mind and critical thinking skills, you are able to come up with new ways and creative ways to solve or basically solve the shrine in different ways. So, for example, it isn't exactly an A to B format. It can be an A to B, A to C, A to D, A to E. Either way, there are multiple ways to solve it. So you're always thinking about how can I do this and how many different ways can I do this. Now let's talk about deep learning. Deep learning refers to learning new skills or mechanics that are continuously built upon and remembered throughout the duration of the game. For example, in Luigi's Mansion 2 at the beginning of every stage, they were given a new skill or tool, and throughout that level, you get to play with that mechanic and work with it and build your skills with it. Finally, a test comes along, which is referred to as the boss, where it requires you to use the skill and show mastery that you have mastered this skill. After you have shown the mastery, it'll repeat the same phase where you either learn a new skill or you build upon that new skill. So, for example, in Luigi's Mansion, you're given a flashlight, then you're given the black light, and then you're given the bright flash. Each mechanic is tested with a boss battle. Now let's look at our game, Ticket to Ride, and we'll be using Guy's 16 principles of good video game learning to help break down this game. When it comes to thinking about how the system functions, the player must think about the bigger picture that requires them to think ahead and which moves they should make in order to get the best outcome, and how to rack up as many points as possible, because the person who completes the route the most and gets an additional 10 points added to their score at the end of the game. For planning out the most efficient routes is the most ideal way to play without wasting any time or resources. Now, let's look at Explore, Think Literally, and Rethink Goals. The game forces players to expand their situational knowledge and consider the courses of action other than linear ones. In other words, think of other alternative paths than just one straight line. During this game, the player must reconsider the path they're using. As the game progresses, routes will be taken or claimed by other players. This will force players to reconsider their final destination due to circumstances, whether it's unreachable or not advantageous enough for point-wise, which is one of the features of the game where they do allow you to get rid of one of your destination cards, because you are given 3 at the end of the game and you are allowed to get rid of 1. Pleasantly frustrating. I found this game to be a bit frustrating and other times rewarding. While trying to claim as many routes as possible, other players sometimes claimed my route that I was planning to use. Other times I wasn't able to accrue enough points, which did make it a bit frustrating, but I never felt that the game was unwinnable. In other words, there was a good balance between reward and frustration.
One of the principles of game-based learning, according to James Gee, is the concept of production. Does this game help produce a story through some sort of interaction, such as solving a puzzle or completing a level? In the game Ticket to Ride specifically, there are no levels, that is just a continuous game from start to finish. However, there are many puzzles one gets to complete along the way, such as completing routes from one end to another. Each player starts with at least one route they have to complete before the end of the game. However, if you get to complete more routes, which you're encouraged to do, you take a little bit more risk throughout the game, and then you have the possibility to earn more points at the end. Points are the main scoring rubric for the final result of who wins the game. Another principle that James Gee outlines in the principles of game design is risk-taking. Is the user empowered and encouraged to take risks throughout this game? What are the benefits of taking these risks, and what is the player risking exactly? In the game Ticket to Ride, all the player is risking is points and the opportunity to build to complete their routes and possibly to block their opponent from completing the other routes, because this is a competitive game. You're playing not just against yourself but against another player. So when you're looking at the routes that you can take, you are given a random route to begin with, which you get to choose from a selection of 3, and then you get to keep at least one of them. So these were examples of 2 routes that I had when I played this game. One was Portland to Nashville and another was Duluth to El Paso. You'll notice that in the bottom right section, the top one was 17 points and the bottom was 10 points respectively. So if I were to complete the route from Portland to Nashville, then I would gain 17 points at the end, and Duluth to El Paso, I would gain 10 points. However, if I was not able to complete one of these routes, then I would lose exactly that many points at the end of the game. The key is you want to try to complete as many routes as feasible. However, you might run out of the train cars that you have to put down on the game because you have a limited amount of those for the game mechanics. And then also you want to make sure that you have enough time in the game to finish completing the routes that you have. So you want to kind of space it out throughout the game. Make sure you're not taking on more than you can chew, but at the same time you want to be aggressively risk-taking, especially in the beginning where you have the most cars to handle. Personally, I enjoyed the game Ticket to Ride very much when I learned how to play it because of this principle by James Gee that he outlined in the Principles for Game Design: agency. Players have a lot of agency over controlling the gaming environment in the game Ticket to Ride. Every single turn that the player has, they have 3 options of how they want to play their turn. One is they could draw 2 cards. So each card has colors, and on those colors that represents where the player can lay down new trains. For the second option, they could play some cards in their hand. So if I had a link of 5 pink cards that I wanted to play, and there is a route that I want to complete with those cards, it would behoove me to put down my trains so that I am closer to completing that link by the end of the game. The third option is, if I want to, I can pick up more routes, I can pick up more paths and be a little bit more aggressive in playing the game so that I can decide, okay, I want to take this gamble or I don't. You also have a lot of agency within each choice. So within the 2 cards that you draw, you get to pick from a series of 5 or pick from the pile of the face down cards. For when you are playing the matching cards, there are spaces on the board that are completely gray, which any card could go down. And then for the picking up the paths each have a different value. So you have to decide as a player, do I want to take a risk with this card, or do I want to play it safe and maybe pick something that's a shorter route I know I can accomplish so that I don't lose the points at the end, but I still gain a little bit extra? But each time that you pick a turn to draw 2 cards, you're not putting down trains on the board. It is then the other opponent's turn to play. And the last principle of James Ski's design principles that I will mention is the well ordered problems. So, the game Ticket to Ride, it is very easy for beginners to understand and learn because the gaming environment naturally builds on itself, allowing a player's mastery to grow and evolve. When you are sitting down with the game for the first time, you might be considering, okay, how do I complete one route and then focus on how do I complete the second route. But as you gain your own strategy in playing this game, you might want to do some things a little bit more aggressively, like block off a path that your other opponent's trying to complete, or perhaps you want to draw new cards, new routes, so that you can see which paths maybe you've already completed a good portion of. So in this case, I think that if you want to play this game very aggressively, you can. If you want to play it a little bit more passively, there are still a lot of win state options in that frame too. But I think that it creates a lot of opportunity for the player to take risks in a safe environment and then also to grow their mastery and evolve while they're playing.